Start recording again? Okay, this is the real deal. I'm ready when you're ready.
All right, let's do this. Hello there. Actually, you know what? We should do the Obi-Wan hello there if we're gonna do a Star Wars episode. Hold on, let's
Okay.
redo that. Hello there, and welcome, folks, to a brand new episode of the Omega Metroid podcast. As you can see, we are Dakota Latsky list. We are Andy's Pateri list, but that is okay because I have someone else from another one of Andy's podcasts. We have Alasyn with us. You might remember them from our couple times that we've done our Omega Metroid versus Zelda cast Q&A challenge, and they're back to talk about a game that, if you know your Omega Metroid lore, that I have been dying to talk about for a long time, and we're doing it just in time for the release of Jedi Fallen or Star Wars Jedi Survivor. We are talking about Jedi Fallen Order with Alasyn Eletha. How are you doing today, Alasyn?
Doing pretty good. I'm really excited to talk about this cuz I didn't really have a lot of people to talk about Fallen Order. And I think this is kind of fun because I don't know much about Metroid, but I'm curious to see how they are kind of similar.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess for our audience, we should talk about maybe I think what are our backgrounds with Star Wars? What is our familiarity with the series? Because I know what your familiarity is, and I know that you are primed for this topic. Pun not intended for Metroid.
I don't. I mean, my as you can see from my background, that I don't know if the listeners will be able to see, but I got a lot of Star Wars stuff. I love Star Wars. I actually am like a new Star Wars fan, but I kind of like took in a lot of content within 3 years. So I would say I've watched all the movies. I've watched the majority of the shows, including the animated ones. I've read at least one book, and now I've played Fallen Order. So I'm pretty like I did a pretty deep dive into it, I'll say.
Yeah, I'm about there as well. I also have a lot of Star Wars gaming experience. I'm definitely very fond of like the mid to early 2000s era of Star Wars games, and I think that's going to be very relevant in talking about this discussion because I think before we talk about this game of Jedi Fallen Order, I think it's important to look at the context this game came out in because it's a bit different than a lot of other Star Wars releases. So Star Wars games were hot in the 90s and early to late 2000s. Like that was like the prime time era of Star Wars gaming. I mean, you had stuff, like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. You had Dark Forces, Jedi Academy, the OG Battlefronts 1 and 2. Um, what am I thinking of? The Rogue Squadron trilogy, one of my favorite gaming trilogies of all time. Republic Commando, a phenomenal first-person shooter, which you can get pretty cheap nowadays. But yeah, phenomenal game, absolutely phenomenal games. And then, so back in 2012, I believe it is, when Disney bought out Lucasfilm, they ended up shutting down LucasArts, which are the developers of the majority of the Star Wars games. And that was met with a lot of controversy. I myself was very disappointed at that because I think they're an incredibly talented studio. And as a result, the level of Star Wars games that we got had just massively decreased. Like it used to be like either yearly or bi-yearly releases, and the games were quite diverse too. But then that release schedule just slowed to a crawl because you didn't have that studio anymore. And so instead, what would happen is the IP would exclusively um, get shipped off to other development studios, which still happened while LucasArts was formed. But now that is exclusively how these games were going to be made from this point forward. And so a lot of people were skeptical of it. And then in 2013, at the EA press conference, they announced that they were doing a Battlefront reboot. And I lost my damn mind. Metroid titles aside, this might have been the loudest I've screamed during an E3 reveal because the
Nice.
Battlefront games, those original Battlefront games, are close to my heart, an important part of my childhood. My friends and I, we would do local split screens countless times. It was like the epitome of like smashing your action figures together, but on a digital battlefield. And to see that coming back on the modern consoles just was awesome. And then the game released, and it was fine. I think a lot of people are a bit hyperbolic on the game's quality. I think it's a fine game. It's a solid title, but it definitely pales in comparison to those original. And then Battlefront 2 came out a couple of years later, and it looked like they were listening to a lot of the feedback on about that game. But then there was the whole loot box scandal and all that, and just Star Wars games was just not in a good place. And
Mm,
just after that, we got the trailer for Jedi Fallen Order, and at this time, a lot of EA's. I guess EA was never really looked at as like a good company, but like after the Battlefront 2 and all that handling, like their reputation was like in the toilet for gamers at that time. And so a lot of people were just kind of shrugging off Jedi Fallen Order, and I was kind of one of them to an extent. I looked at the game and I'm like, it looks fine. Looks like a fun little adventure game, but like it's EA. I don't trust them.
mm,
And then the game came out. Reviews were mostly positive when they came out, and I considered, you know what, maybe I'll buy this at a discount. And so the following year, after 2019 when it came out in 2020, I ended up buying the game on sale for about $20, I think. And man, I fell in love with this game. And if
mhm.
I had played this in 2019, it probably would have been my game of the year. My current game of the year for 2019 is Luigi's Mansion 3. But if I I think
Nice.
I think this might have topped Luigi's Mansion 3 for me because every aspect of this game, it's not a perfect game, far from a perfect
Mhm,
game, but every aspect of this game just works for me, from the storytelling to the gameplay, to the environments and the art direction, um, and the characters are so good. And so I just absolutely love this game, and ever since then, I've been trying to get more people to try this game, especially nowadays, because you can get this game for dirt cheap. I mean, it's very, very common to find this on sale for like $5 to $7, depending on which edition you get. It's on Game Pass on both the Xbox and PC. It's on the PlayStation Plus Essentials, so it's a very easy, accessible title. And yeah, I would definitely recommend a lot of people checking it out. What about you, Allison? How did you get into trying out Jedi Fallen Order?
well, like I said, I'm kind of new to Star Wars, about 3 years into it. I was mostly indifferent, like growing up. But so I wanted to kind of dip my toes into the video game side of it, and it was just another motivator to get myself a PlayStation, because there were a few PlayStation games that I had been wanting to play but haven't been able to because I didn't have one. So I got myself a PlayStation, and I went ahead and got Fallen Order first. And I thought it was a good game to start off with, because one, it's newer, and two, it's like it takes place in a very prime like area of the story that I enjoy. So like post Order 66 kind of stuff, and I can connect it to a lot of the shows that are coming out right now. A lot of like I don't know if anybody here has seen, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, but there's a couple connections to that show. So I was super excited to actually see those connections. So yeah, I just finally picked it up and started playing. And while I agree it's not a perfect game, I loved it. I mean, aside from like Lego Star Wars, I wasn't sure how a Star Wars game was gonna play. And I'm not the best at like like fast combat games, but I really enjoyed being able to play as a Jedi and make the snap decisions on what to do and how to solve puzzles, how to carve through enemies basically. And I really liked it, and plus it has a really like compelling story. So yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. So since we're talking about the story right now, I was thinking we could talk about the gameplay since that does tie more into the inspired by
Right.
Metroid theme. But since we're already on the story, you want to just get that? You want to just get that to that now, or actually, should we wait till the end to do that? Maybe do a little spoiler warning at the end for people in case they want
Yeah,
to.
let's do that.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do that. We'll talk about the story at the end. Give you all a little spoiler warning in case you want to experience it for yourself. I guess we'll just go right into the gameplay then for this game. So this game is really interesting because it takes inspiration from a lot of different series, including Metroid. It has this kind of back and forth multi-layered backtracking traversal that you'd find in a Metroidvania.
Hmm.
It also incorporates the scanning feature from Metroid Prime, although I don't think it does it quite as well as it does in Metroid Prime. So Allison, I know you've played Super Metroid. I don't believe you've played anything besides that, correct?
I've only played Super Metroid. It was my first Metroid game. I lost a bet to Andy Spiteri, And so I had to play Super Metroid. I really liked it. He should have just told me that there was a baby alien involved, and I would have played it without making a bet. So, but I really enjoyed it. Yes.
Absolutely, yeah. Super Metroid is goated. I love it. It's not quite my favorite like Andy's is, but I mean it's a phenomenal game nonetheless. And I don't think you'll find
Hmm.
many people that disagree with that. But so the scanning feature in Metroid Prime, basically you have what's called a visor system in that game. And
Hmm.
I know this is just basic stuff for most of the audience, but I just want to explain it to you to kind of get you set up for how it translates to
Yeah.
Fallen Order. But yeah,
Fair
basically,
enough.
so you have your combat visor. That's like your basic first person view. That's where you're like shooting everything. And then you can also change different modes like an X-ray vision or a thermal vision. But one of the default visors you get at the beginning is the scan visor. And what happens then is you put your cannon down and you enter scan mode, and you can see all of the objects in the game that you're able to scan. And instead of shooting them, you actually scan them, and you can learn information about that. And that's also how you
Hmm.
collect. You can collect the game's lore that way. You can scan enemies and learn more about them, potential weak points, or just learn more about the environment in general. And it's a fan favorite visor and a really cool way to introduce environmental storytelling. And Jedi Fallen Order has a scanning feature that is definitely based off of it from Prime, though I don't think it's done quite as well. Because basically the way it works is your little droid buddy, BD1 or is it BD8? I can't remember.
It's BD1. Yeah.
BD1. You know what? I'm getting it confused with BB8 from the other trilogy. That's what it is. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
BD1, a wonderful droid buddy. Gotta love
Hmm.
him. But so he'll randomly walk up to objects, and then you'll get a little prompt on the bottom of your D-pad if you're playing with a controller to scan the object. And that's basically kind of like the scan visor, except that you have to wait for BD1 to do it automatically. You don't get the choice to do it
Hmm.
whenever you want. And sometimes BD1 just will not scan an object, and that happened to me on one of my most recent playthroughs. I was facing one of the mini bosses on Bogano. It was like I can't remember. I think it's the Abogabo. It's the super variant that you encounter after you leave the temple for the first time.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The one that hits hard. So I just defeated
Yep.
that, and
That's
I was
me.
like waiting. I was waiting for BD1 to like give me the cue to scan, and he just didn't do it, and he faded out from existence. Like, okay, well,
Ah.
okay. If this was Metroid Prime, I could have just scanned him even before any of that. But yeah.
Hmm.
So minor nitpick aside, it's a really really cool environmental storytelling feature nonetheless. Though I hope that in Survivor that you do get a little bit more control over that, because I think it would be a lot more helpful to do that, and also just maybe a better way to like cue what objects are and aren't scannable. Because in Metroid Prime, it's very obvious to tell. In the first game, there's like an icon that's layered on top of it, but in 2 and 3, which is definitely my preference, the objects are like completely highlighted altogether. So like you cannot miss if an object is scannable or not. But in this game, some of the objects are highlighted and some of them aren't, and you're just kind of it's kind of weird. There isn't really a consistent visual design on them, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I did appreciate that. And it's usually, like you said, it's just prompted by BD1 kind of like hopping off of Cal's shoulder and like moving over to an area. But if you kind of miss the hitbox for that, you miss the item. You don't really know what BD1 is going to want to scan or not. And I wanted 100% that game. So I had to go back through and, kind of find those and look them up. So I can agree that it's not perfect, but it is pretty cool. I will say that I just finished another game, Horizon Zero Dawn, and they have a similar scanning feature, and it's actually pretty cool. And I think after what you described to me from Metroid, it's similar to that, where you can prompt it on your own. Sometimes it gives you a little like signal to like, oh hey, there's a signal out there, I should scan it. But yeah, you kind of use it to not so much your environment, but a lot of the machines that you fight in that game. So that might be a better version of what Fallen Order tried to do. So yeah, I would agree. I hope that it does kind of improve in Survivor, whereas you maybe get more prompted by the environment rather than BD1, because like I said, I didn't know what BD1 wanted to scan until he was scanning it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you kind of have to like pay attention to like what he does, cuz he'll pop off your shoulder and you
Hmm.
have to follow him. And sometimes it's a short distance away and you can do it, but sometimes he'll just like go off on his own little adventure and like it becomes like a wild
Yeah.
goose chase, and if you miss it then you miss it and it's over.
Yep.
So yeah. little bit of annoying, but again, nothing game breaking, nothing that like lowers the letter grade by any means. It's just kind of a quality
Mhm.
of life improvement that I think can be worked on for the next entry. So yeah, and then obviously that's one aspect of it, but obviously the most obvious aspect of the Metroidvania element is the backtracking and doing
Mhm.
so through the use of new abilities, which in this case is the Force power ups in this game. So basically, the way it
Yes.
works is throughout the adventure, Cal. So at the beginning of the adventure, Cal is almost completely disconnected from the Force to survive because otherwise he will be punted like he will be shortly after the start of the adventure. And so throughout the course of the adventure, he reminisces about his teachings with his master Jaro Tapal. And throughout those, you do these little tutorial sequences of him as a Padawan learning the Force abilities, and that's like him basically relearning them in real life. And that's how you get these abilities that will allow you to traverse these pathways. You get the wall run at first, and then I didn't. I in my most recent playthrough, I didn't get. I only finished the first Pagano sequence, so I was just about to land on Zepho before we started recording. So I can't remember the order of the other power ups, but I know you get a double jump later. You can start force pulling. You get force pull and force push abilities later.
Mhm.
And I can't remember the exact order you get those, but that's basically the equivalent of the power ups you'd get in a Metroid game. And they also come in very handy during combat as well, which is part of the Metroid experience as well. The force pull and force push in particular are like super fun to use on stormtroopers,
Yeah.
just absolutely ragdolling them across the map. It's so satisfying.
Yeah, I loved that. That was like kind of what I meant about really enjoying being a Jedi, because you like see how Jedi are in the movies or in the shows and stuff. And especially in like older versions, it's not as scary, to be honest. Like now that we're seeing like more newer stuff and technology is getting better, Jedi and their force powers and like Sith and stuff and their force powers are kind of scary if you think about it. So it was kind of cool to like have that power through the game and to be able to like just either push a bunch of stormtroopers off of like cliffs or whatever, or like pull them into you and just annihilate them. That was super cool. I really did enjoy that.
Yeah, and I think that might be a good way to segue into the combat section of the game and leave this little Metroid bubble for now. So the combat, from my understanding, is based heavily on Dark Souls, a game that I have not played yet, but likely
Okay.
will someday. Not just the combat, but also the save system as well, from my understanding. But what were your thoughts on the combat in this game, Allison?
Um, it always like I said, I'm not the best at like fast combo combat games because I'm not like a very like swift player. I guess I don't have very good movement. Um but so it always like takes me a good minute to kind of figure things out and figure out the controls and the buttons that you need to press, and maybe pick up patterns and what button combos you could use, or trying to think more on the fly and what would work best. So it did take me a minute, and if anybody's like me, it will take you a minute. But once I got the groove and once I kind of got it down, I really enjoyed it. Like, I enjoyed being able to, one, pick the lightsaber style that you get to fight with, whether it's single, double bladed. I really kind of wish that at closer to the end you get upgrade to the lightsaber where you can pull it apart, and then you have two lightsabers versus just the single double bladed one. I want to see more of that in the next game, and I think from the trailer that you do, because it's more like just a move where you can do that for like a hot second. So I'd love to see that more. But yeah, they integrate so much with, you go through your adventure, you unlock power-ups, you unlock lightsaber moves, you unlock all these different like kind of power moves that you can then start to put into your pattern of combat or your style of combat to fight these patterns of these enemies that gradually increase in difficulty as you go through the game. So I appreciated it. I thought it was well paced, as for me, because like I said, I struggled a little bit, so it wasn't like crazy off the bat for me, and it was easy to learn and gradually grow with it as well as it did through the game.
Yeah, I'm definitely inclined to agree with you. So when I restarted my playthrough, I thought I was just gonna be hot stuff, and I was like, you know what? I'll do the Jedi Master difficulty. Why not? I did normal last time.
Oh no.
I'll do Jedi Master. You know, I'm a gamer. I can do this. Absolutely not. I could not get past like a basic squadron of stormtroopers.
Mm.
That was brutal on Jedi Master difficulty, and it's really in that parry timing. Like like
Yes.
they hit hard on that difficulty too. You can only take like maybe a hit or two before you die, so you have to be perfect. But it's
Mhm.
that parry timing is brutal, and it takes a lot of time to get used to because the parry timing is never what you think it's going to be. So you would expect the parry timing to be like when the blaster is about to collide with you, or when an enemy's attack is about to hit you. But you have to time it just before then, and it always throws my timing off a lot. So I had to lower the difficulty to increase that window to do it to get myself used to that just in time for the podcast. I do want to practice a lot more though, because like I can imagine playing through that game without without taking hits has to be like so much fun once you like really find the groove. But yeah,
Mhm.
it has a very steep learning curve, but it also has a wide variety of difficulty options, I think, to accommodate you regardless of what kind of skill level you have with these kind of games.
Mhm. Yeah, I usually like I'm always tempted to pick the easier option because I'm like, I usually just kind of suck right off the bat. But then I know that I would get bored later on, like once I finally picked it up. So I usually do the normal. Um, which some people are probably like, I do the harder mode and it's fine. I'm like, that's great. Good for you. I can't do that. Um the parry thing is super cool because you see that in the movies and the shows and they make it look because they're Jedi, so they make it look so easy and it's like second nature to them. But like when you have to do it in the game, you're like, wow, it did really take them a lot of training to get there because it's taken me forever. So no, yeah, I really like that aspect of it too.
Yeah, I always do normal mode on most games too. The one exception is FPSs. I usually go at least hard mode for those on my first run just because like I'm a bit more experienced in that realm. But yeah, generally I like to do normal on my first playthrough, and so that's what I did the first time I played Fallen Order, and I'll probably do it again when I do my second playthrough because man, that learning curve is steep. But yeah,
Mhm.
regardless, a very fun combat system, I think. Once you do get that parry down, it is so satisfying, to just to plow through enemy after enemy, to just time everything right. And it looks like credit to the animators at Respawn, which is the
Yes.
studio that made this game owned by EA. Like the animations in this game are so beautiful and fluid and everything just seamlessly flows together so much even in combat scenarios where you're like constantly shifting between all these different locations and stances and whatnot, and it's just so cool to see on screen once you start really diversifying your combos and stuff.
Mhm. I agree.
So that's the combat aspect of the game, and then there's one more part of the game, which is the puzzle solving aspect of the game, which takes a lot of inspiration from the Tomb Raider and Zelda series, I think. The Tomb Raider series in particular, because you're literally exploring tombs in a few cases. But
Mhm.
but yeah, this is also something I really think complements kind of the Metroidvania gameplay because typically you're using your abilities, for traversal, and that's the Metroidvania aspect of it. But once you get to these tombs, it starts using those same abilities and using them in a way that fits more of these other genres. And particularly the second temple, the first one I thought was okay, but the second one you go to, um, I believe yeah, you know what? Because there's 2 temples on Zepho, if I remember correctly, and it's like
Yeah.
yeah, that's right, yeah, there's 2 temples on Zepho, and the second one you go to, I really enjoyed that one, and I really loved all the creative uses for that, and especially it actually kinda reminded me of the water temple from Ocarina of Time in
Oh
particular.
yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I'm one of the few people that actually likes the water temple, so I didn't mind it.
It's really not yeah, it's really not that bad. I would say most Zelda fans that are like kind of like Andy and I level, they don't really think that the water temple's that hard. It's more of a casual gamer thing or a casual Zelda fan thing. Um yeah, I would agree. The cool part is that the puzzles incorporate the force the force power that you are relearning or that Cal is relearning. So the first one is the push, so it's kind of like these ancient beings are teaching through more than just the force, like with other elements and technology, how the force kind of works, more of a visual. And then Cal relearns and reconnects to the force that way by seeing it and solving these puzzles. And then it's like it kind of unlocks in his brain. Um, also while he's working through his trauma and stuff. And then the second one has the push. So I like the second one too because the puzzles include both pull and push. And one of the cooler puzzles is usually when you have to like pull a lamp that has fire on it and like push it somewhere else to catch like vines or something on fire. So you kind of have to use some quick movement there, but also figure out, okay, well, which lamp is closer to this vine, or I'm seeing vines, where the heck is the lamp that I need to catch fire to this? And it kind of like does this whole puzzle thing. And then sometimes there's water in the way, which was super annoying, but also made me feel super smart when I figured out how to go around it. So the puzzle aspects are really cool. I wouldn't say it was quite Zelda level just because it was mostly focused in the temples, or quote unquote the dungeons of the game, and some of
Hmm.
it, a lot of it is overworld exploration, so that's only just a fraction of the game. So I wouldn't say it's quite like up to that, to Zelda's like level of puzzle solving, but I definitely got Zelda vibes from it.
Yeah, that's I was specifically comparing it to the dungeons and those
Mm-hmm.
types of Zelda games. That's the comparison I was making there. But yeah. But yeah, definitely Zelda and then definitely Tomb Raider. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tomb Raider games at all.
Oh, it's been so long since I played a Tomb Raider game.
Yeah, I like the Tomb Raider games a lot. I think I prefer the classic ones more than the new Tomb Raider games. They're still fine, but they take themselves a bit too seriously. I much
Mm-hmm.
prefer the more goofy and cheesy kind of Tomb Raider games.
Okay.
But I do think the gameplay in them is pretty cool though, and it definitely harkened back to a lot of those older titles, which I really liked for sure.
Nice.
So that marks kind of the gameplay that you're going to get in this game. You have the combat of a Souls-like game with the exploration of a Metroidvania, and then puzzle solving of a Tomb Raider, along with maybe some Zelda dungeon-esque. And that's kind of the experience you're going to get in Jedi Fallen Order, of course, wrapped in a Star Wars skin. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that anybody, regardless if they're a Star Wars fan or not, can enjoy that game just on those merits alone. That being said, if you are a Star Wars fan, though, I do think you're going to get a lot more out of this game because it does take place in a really cool and, frankly, surprisingly unexplored part of the Star Wars universe that I'm glad we're really starting to get more information on. With
Mm-hmm.
stuff like this, Kenobi, Andor, which I think is the best Star Wars project ever made, in my opinion.
I loved Andor. It was
Andor
great.
is incredible. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and so it's really cool to see all that connected together. Um, let's talk about the characters in this story.
Okay.
Not necessarily the story itself. Let's talk about the characters in this story. So obviously we got our main character, Cal Kestis. I'm going to pull up the IMDb here, played by Cameron Monaghan. We have our main secondary. Where are you? Deborah Wilson, who plays Sir Junda, kind of the master to the apprentice in this case. We have Daniel Roebuck, plays the amazing Grease Drydas, might be my favorite character in this adventure. I love Grease. Elizabeth Grulon, who plays Trilla Sunduri. Ooh, mystery character. And then we got and yeah, that's basically no. We have one more. We have Tina Ivlev who plays Night Sister Marin, who you'll get to know about the last third of your adventure. She doesn't come into play until very late in the game, but a very memorable character nonetheless. What did you think about the
Mm-hmm.
characters in this adventure, Allison?
I I really appreciated the characters because it helped, like, like you said, it's like a Star Wars skin, but like you really felt like you were a part of Star Wars because of these characters, because they have experienced stuff that I've been watching throughout the Star Wars, like all the content of Star Wars. So Cal Kestis, who was a Padawan during Order 66. And so he's kind of dealing with a lot of stuff. You got Seer, who also went through Order 66 and was captured by the Empire, so she's got her own nonsense going on. Not that it's nonsense; it's actually pretty traumatic. And then Grease, Grease was absolutely hilarious. He was definitely like a really fun character, although he almost gets you killed a number of times. So, I like to give him crap for that. Trilla was definitely like kind of a shock there. We'll talk about that in the spoiler portion of the show. And then actually, my favorite character was Marin, who I always thought the Night Sisters were kind of like gross and not a fun time, but I loved her. I loved her so much, and I really hope she's like a pretty integral part of the second game because I just adore her.
Yeah, I absolutely love these characters. Cal, so when I first played this game, I thought Cal was kind of a bland, weak character, and
Really?
yeah, I wasn't like I didn't dislike him, but I was just like, okay, he's just kind of a standard protagonist.
Okay.
But as the adventure progresses and you start to learn more about him, I really think that they do a good job of like turning him into a really interesting character,
Okay.
especially because of the choices he has to make at the end. Which are
Mhm.
very difficult, but choices that he has to make. Which we'll get to that in the spoiler section. But yeah, I really ended up enjoying what the game did with him. Um, Seer, I thought was a really great supporting character. I'm a big fan in general of Deborah Wilson. She plays a lot of on-screen gaming characters, and like she has a very recognizable face. And so I remember playing the Modern Warfare reboot and seeing her. I was like, "Yo, that's Seer!"
Nice.
So yeah, big fan of Deborah Wilson. I think she does a tremendous job in this role as well. Really curious to see where her character goes. And then my man Grease. Oh my gosh, I love this guy so much. You start the game off with him just completely on the wrong foot. You guys don't like each other. He hates your guts. You're annoyed with him, whatever. But then as the adventure slowly continues, you start to warm up to each other, and it's super wholesome, and I love it. And
Mhm.
he's I think he's an example of good comedic relief in Star Wars because there's obviously, as
Yes.
we know, a lot of bad comedic relief to go
Yeah, there
around.
is. Yeah, I agree. I would say like maybe I kind of had like um an already formed opinion about Cal going into it because it's obviously I only played it this year and so it's or maybe like December, but it's obviously been out for a couple years. So I've seen him around in stuff like on social media and stuff, but I'm surprised like the whole story wasn't honestly spoiled for me. I somehow avoided that over like the course of 3 years. So maybe I already had kind of this formed opinion about him, but I did really like him. Um and I will say that, you know, his story is similar to a lot of like exist the Jedi that are still existing after Order 66. So it wasn't like new to see what he was going through and what was, you know, going on with him and hiding his, you know, his force sensitivity to not be murdered and just trying to live his life after his trauma. But I do appreciate how much he grows, how much he kind of opens up and is willing to accept help and you know, do something greater than what he was doing for 5 years after that, you know, that horrific event. So yeah, I really liked him, and I liked something that I appreciated through playing the game was at the beginning I was like, this is Cal's journey. But when you get to a point that we'll talk about in the spoiler section, you get to a point with him, and I was like, this is our journey. I'm with him on this, and we're doing this together. And I felt very connected to Cal, and part of one of the aspects of the game is you get to customize a lot of your stuff, how he looks, how his lightsaber looks. And I was trying really hard to keep it how it was because he, you know, inherited it from his master. But then when we get to this point, I was like, I feel better about customizing things because this is our adventure, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I really liked that the game like kind of created that for me.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I pretty much did the exact same thing with the lightsaber customization. For me, it was I won't go into spoilers, but all I will say is the ice planet. That's for me was the moment where I was like, you know what, this lightsaber is mine now.
Exactly. Yep.
That's where we're gonna start breaking from the mold and start doing things our own way. That's all I'm gonna
Mhm.
say for now. I will say I thought some of the customization in this game was kind of weak.
Just a little bit, yes.
Particularly with the ponchos. I like all the other customization. I thought that was fine, but I thought the poncho system was kind of weak, and especially because the only way you unlock ponchos is through crates on the map. There's no other way you can unlock them, and the designs are pretty
Mhm.
limited for what they are. It seems like Jedi Survivor is fixing that. It looks like there's going to be a lot more variety in the
That's
clothing
cool.
customization in that game. So really excited to see how that turns out. So yeah,
I agree. I did not like the ponchos. I thought they were thought they were kind of dumb. But my brother was kind of like hanging out with me while I was playing this game, and he's like, I wonder if he's always wearing ponchos because the game is so like wet. He everywhere he goes, there's like water and like he's running through a swamp. He's running through these tombs that have water. He's running through just everywhere has water. And I was like, that's a good point. Maybe that is why he has ponchos.
It literally in the first cutscene when he enters the Bogano temple, he takes a seat, but instead of taking a seat on the stone that's above water, he sits his butt down in the water and just
I love it.
soaks himself
Yeah,
for no reason.
I do remember that. Yeah.
Bro, what are you doing?
Um, I will say though that getting those upgrades, because it's not a lot of weapon upgrades that you unlock by retraversing the game like you do, or like I remember in Super Metroid. But a lot of the upgrades when you unlock new powers and you get to go back and re-explore new areas, is those like the customization. So the ponchos, how BD1 looks, how the mantis looks, and how the lightsaber looks. So if you're into the customization stuff, you definitely want to be going back and retraversing those areas and um, using your new abilities to unlock those.
Yeah, and you can even collect early upgrades by doing so, particularly the double-bladed lightsaber. So you're supposed to collect that.
Yes.
You're supposed to collect that when you hit Dathomir, which is going to be the last planet on your journey. But you can actually collect that in Bogano after you collect. I think it's the double jump upgrade. I could be mistaken. It's been a while since I played through that portion of the game. But you can actually
I do remember like getting it and I was like, when did I get that? But it's just like it's an upgrade table. So every time you get to an upgrade table, you upgrade the lightsaber. But I was like, when did I pick that up? Like
But yeah. So if you play your cards right, you can actually upgrade to the double bladed like way earlier than you're
pretty
supposed
early.
to, and it's absolutely
Hmm.
sick. It allows you to block multiple blaster bolts in one. So typically, you have to click the parry button on every single bolt that comes your way. But when you get the double bladed, you just have to click it once, and then every bolt that comes your way before you put it down will automatically be blocked back at the enemy, which is especially not only is it good for if you're being swarmed by enemies, it's really good for once you start encountering miniguns with super high rates of fire.
Oh
You could
yeah.
just block all of that and just insta kill like that. So
Hmm. I will say that I once I got that upgrade and then I was like, why am I dying so much all of a sudden? I figured out I sucked with the double-sided lightsaber. So I usually stuck with the regular lightsaber and that helped immensely. But when I got that upgrade, I was like, this is so sick. And then I was using it and I was like, wow, I'm dying all the time. I think it's just because I wasn't great at the new fighting style that Cal took on.
yeah, they occupy very different. So the single bladed lightsaber is best for one on ones. The double bladed
Hmm.
is good for crowd control and again, repelling back those blaster bolts. And being able to find the perfect situations for each is how you get the best out of both of them. But yeah, I definitely tend to stick to the one bladed for sure. That definitely is the most reliable on just that raw combat and just the parries and
Hmm.
all that. So we've talked about the gameplay, we've talked about the characters. Let's talk about this adventure. Let's talk about the stories. Let's talk about our favorite moments from this adventure. So let's get right into the tutorial sequence because I think this is such a phenomenal setup to this game. I love the way that the busted Star Destroyer pans in, just like a classic Star Wars film, but with a new twist. Instead of that Star Destroyer heading onto the Tantive 4, you have a busted Jedi Star Cruiser on the planet of Braca, which has now appeared in Bad Batch as well for people who are interested in watching that. But um, but yeah, really cool there. And then we see Cal and his pal Prof. I think it is. I think Prof
I
is
think
his
it's
name.
Prof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Prof.
Yeah.
And basically, they're scrap workers, tearing apart these old ships that are coming down on the planet. And then this is basically how you learn the controls, and you basically are just parkouring and gymnasium your way through this industrial scrapyard. It's a really cool sequence that gets you adjusted to the controls, and then a freak accident happens, and one of the Star Destroyer's
Yeah.
couplings falls because they're not powered on right now. They're being hoisted up by cranes. The power coupling falls, and you both fall down. Prof is about to fall to his death, and the only way you can save him is by using the Force. The one thing that you should never be using in a post Order 66 world. And just like that, the Imperials are on Cal. They kill Prof. Cal is on the run and he's rescued by Seer, and that is our basically our quick tutorial sequence. Obviously, we're doing the Cliff Notes version, but Alasyn, what did you think of these opening moments of Jedi Fallen Order?
My instant thought, and I don't know if there's a game previous to this series that incorporated this like level of parkour, but my connection was Prince of Persia. I was like, this is Prince of Persia all over. The jumping and the jumping between things and it's hard to say. Just the parkour in general was very Prince of Persia to me. So I instantly loved it because I remember loving those games, and it was a good way to kind of show you to also pay attention to your surroundings. Video games are very good at like spray painting the ledges that you can grab onto. So pay attention to your surroundings. Also, the intro music to that game was phenomenal. It reminded me of like like the goblins or whatever in the Hobbit movie, their little goblin song in the mountain. But I thought that was cool because that was very like that was a little bit different than the Star Wars music we're used to. So I love that. But yeah, it was definitely like a start to where you were just like, oh no, I'm gonna have to use the Force at one point, and like the Inquisitors are gonna be after Cal, and that's what they did, and I thought it was good. Like they did a good job, and hats off the Prof because he could have turned Cal in for probably a heavy penny, but he didn't. He was a good friend.
Yeah, he's a real homie. Get you a homie like
Mm-hmm.
Prof for real.
Yeah.
Alasyn, you know what I love? I love
What?
trains. And you know what?
Okay.
I'm a really simple guy. You put a train in something, and I'm going to enjoy it. And what does this and
Okay.
what does this game do?
They have a train. Yeah.
Right after everything goes bad and you're on the run, you fall, and what do you land on? A hover train.
A train.
I
Mm-hmm.
am in paradise at this moment. You're just and this is where the game teaches you about the combat. So before then it was
Mm-hmm.
teaching you about traversal. It teaches you combat on your train, and you're working your way from the back of the train all the way to the front, like it's Snowpiercer.
Yep.
Like a much lighter Snowpiercer. And this is where you learn how to deflect enemies, where you learn about the parrying mechanics, and there's all sorts of stuff going around. I've actually never played a Prince of Persia game before, but what this did
Oh,
remind me,
okay.
yeah, but what this did remind me of was the Uncharted games. It, I
Okay.
got.
I haven't played those.
I've never played those either. I've just watched gameplay of those on
Okay.
YouTube. I've never owned a PS3 or PS4 or so. But it did remind me a lot of the Uncharted, especially with kind of the way the railings are painted. I thought it was a lot better than those games though, because Uncharted, it's very explicit what you can and can't climb onto, and it doesn't quite blend into the environment. It's like, okay, well that's a bit obvious. In this game,
Mm-hmm.
it's still obvious, but the game does a lot of really clever tricks to blend it in more with the environment, so that it's still recognizable as what you can and can't climb, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. It doesn't feel too gamey, if that makes sense.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, and this train sequence just kind of combines all of that. You're getting shot up in this spacecraft. There's power couplings being disabled. Cars are getting thrown off the tracks, and you have to like slowly work your way through the situation and climb your way through all the wreckage that's happening. And then it finally culminates with a boss fight against I can't remember. It's one of the numbered sisters. I can't remember what number she is, but she's very
Yeah, it's
menacing. The
hard to
one that
keep
kills
track of
the
all of
one
them.
that kills Prof, and the one who will become
Mm-hmm.
very important later in the story.
Mm-hmm.
But you get it's kind of your first taste of the boss fight, an unwinnable boss fight, but a boss fight nonetheless. And it kind of
Mm-hmm.
teaches you of what's going to be in store for you in that regard in your adventure. And that ends off the tutorial sequence.
Yes. I did like the train. I appreciated the like high stakes way of teaching you how to fight a little bit more of the combat. I will say probably one of my most ridiculous like or not mine, but one of the things that I think is ridiculous about the game is that you have to press a button when you jump at something to grab it, like a ledge or like a grating. You have to press a button to grab it. He like grabs it and then it's like press R2 to make sure that you grab it. I'm like, he's already on it. Why do I gotta press a button? This seems so goofy. I hope they fix that in the second game. Because sometimes I would forget to press the button and then I'd fall to my death. So even though he's already holding on to it. But I do remember getting to the sister, the Inquisitor, and I've seen a bunch of content on Inquisitors. I've read the Ahsoka book where she fights an Inquisitor, and I was very like overconfident. I was like, these Inquisitors ain't nothing, and then of course I don't know how to play this game, so I was like, I ain't nothing either. So I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to win this fight, but it was still a good time. I really did like that they show that you can't win this fight because then you know I have to grow with Cal as a Jedi in order to beat this character later. So that was a very good intro to the game.
Well, Cal Kestis definitely is no Ahsoka Tano. Very few Jedi
No.
are.
Very true.
Then again, she is no Jedi.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, we're rescued by Seer, and we learned that Seer learned about our whereabouts because they are her and Grief are monitoring Imperial channels, and they found out that the Imperials were onto us after we attempted to save Prof's life, and ultimately failed after he sacrificed himself. And basically, they're trying to rebuild the Jedi Order, and they need help. They need to look for clues on the planet Bogano, but Seer, who used to be a Jedi, has completely cut herself off from the Force and cannot access the temple, and Grief is not a Jedi at all. So they need your help to do that. So we access the Bogano temple, and we get our little hologram buddy thanks to BD1, Jedi Master Eno Cordova, and he has been looking for knowledge from the Zepho, which I gotta say, as a Metroid fan, immediately the Zepho remind me so much of the Chozo from the Metroid
Okay.
series. Here we have
Mm-hmm.
an advanced technological ancient civilization that have mysteriously disappeared for unknown reasons. Although in this game we actually find out why they disappear at the very end. But yeah, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of similarities there. Not necessarily a Metroid influence. This is a fairly common trope within sci-fi in general,
Right.
including Alien, which is a heavy inspiration for Metroid, but I thought it was a really cool connection nonetheless.
That is cool because I mean, of course, I wouldn't make that connection, but having played Super Metroid and like being like, oh yeah, they kind of have, and of course, I don't know the lore behind them, but they do kind of have these like what these like little robot dudes that come alive and attack you in Super Metroid, if I remember right, and so do the Zepho. So that's kind of cool. I never would have made that connection.
Yeah, yeah. So those are exclusively in Super Metroid, the Chorizo, which are like
Oh, okay.
those fake Shozo statues that'll come to life. And unfortunately, we don't really know too much about them. I just assume they're like a security system.
Okay.
But yeah. And I actually never made that connection before because yeah, in that first temple there are those Zepho robots that patrol the temple. I wonder
Yeah.
I wonder if those are loosely inspired by the Chorizo or not. Very interesting.
I don't know. I when I first saw one, I thought of that robot that Loki sends after Thor in the first Thor movie.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I
I
was.
can see that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it has very
Mhm.
similar, like very stiff movements. I could definitely see that.
Mhm.
So yeah, Eno Cordova, he's basically like I don't want to say your tour guide, but basically this guy is long since passed away. He only exists in hologram form, and BD1 can only access these holograms after he's scanned specific elements of the environment that Cordona has permitted. And he basically says that, hey, there are these keys that you need to access in these Zepho temples. You need to learn the knowledge about the Zepho to find a holocron that I've hidden, which will lead to a list of Force sensitive children. And this is
Mhm.
exactly what Seer needs to rebuild the Jedi Order. And that's basically our MacGuffin chase for this game. We are trying to find the,
Yeah.
the clues. We are trying to find the keys to make our way to this penultimate MacGuffin, and that's gonna be basically that main thing that our heroes and villains are going to be fighting their way through the story. And that leads us to the planet Zepho. And Allison, I'm gonna let you take the wheel here since this is where my last playthrough ended just before we started the podcast. I stopped just as we were landing on planet Zepho, and so I'll let you take the wheel on the story. What were your favorite gameplay moments during this section of the game?
Um, I I will say that it took me a second to like catch on to why we were here at this planet. I'm pretty sure Sear says that it's like unchartable. No, the Empire doesn't know where it is, and so it was. I was like, oh, this is kind of like their home base, you know. But it actually serves a purpose. She helps you meet BD1, whose memories have been wiped by I'm sorry, what is his name? Uh,
Cordova.
That's right. The memories have been wiped by because he didn't want anybody else to find BD1 unless BD1 decided to trust somebody, and that would be how he unlocked his memories to help them find this holocron. So you go to this Zepho temple where you meet BD1, you meet Eno, and you kind of take on the quest to find this holocron. And the Jedi Master's clues to you are the three sages whose tombs you have to go to in order to learn more about the Force that the Jedi don't necessarily learn that way, but also a threat that Eno had foreseen of basically Order 66 that the Jedi Council didn't listen to, which is unfortunate. And yeah, so he gives you these clues that take you to other planets, including Deathmere, including Bogano, and the Wookiee one that I can't remember the name of.
Kashyyyk.
Kashyyyk, thank you. Um, and so yeah, that's kind of how he sets you on this journey to find the holocron, and it's very it feels very kind of like Zelda-ish. I'm not sure if this is like a Metroid thing too, but it feels very Zelda-ish where they tell you to go to these three areas, unlock the secrets, and then it'll give you the key that you need to like beat the game. So, you go to these three planets and you do come back and revisit them, I think one each. Even if you've already explored the temple and unlocked the secret to getting that holocron. And yeah, it's pretty linear, but you still can kind of do things in like kind of an order that you want up until you need skills to progress. Um, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of the whole game. But a lot of it is exploration too, so it kind of adds some hours to it. Otherwise, I think you could get it done pretty quickly.
Yeah, so the three temple structure I definitely associate more with Zelda. There are Metroid games
Mm-hmm.
that have done that before, although I specifically refer to that as Metroid attempting a Zelda formula in that regard.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, because when I think of the traditional Metroid formula, I think something more akin to Super Metroid, where you might spend one time in another area, then you might go to a new area, and then you might backtrack to another area, and then you might backtrack to another area, and then you might go to a new area after that. And it's kind of it's kind of like a road trip where you don't quite know where you're going to go next. Whereas in Zelda, you know pretty much. It's like, okay, I'm going to this first temple, then I'm going to the second
Right.
temple in that order specifically.
Right.
And this game, it kind of mixes and matches because again, like there's two temples on Zepho, so you're going to be backtracking to that temple, but even still, you're doing all of these in a set order, just like what the Zelda dungeons would be.
Right.
Absolutely. And so, tell me a bit more about Zepho when you first land there, because again, I'm still. My memory is still a little bit hazy. I remember some specific gameplay sequences, but I don't know the exact order that everything happens because you do have two very different trips to that planet.
The first one is like where you're kind of taking on the quest, and your goal is to get to that initial Zepho like spire that and the whole planet is very barren looking when you land there. And then it kind of sets you on the quest, but then when you come back and I'm trying to remember. I think when you oh gosh, I'm getting things like mixed up in my brain, but you do come back for a purpose. I'm having a hard time remembering it for some reason. I'm worried that I'm like disconnecting it from a different planet, but you come back once you're ready to see the secrets that the three sages kind of like unlock for you, and Cal has like a vision of what it would be like once he does find the holocron and does find these force sensitive children. And it's a warning from the Zepho, like in my opinion, it's a warning from the past Zepho who got a little too greedy, got a little too power hungry, and kind of annihilated their own existence. Saying like, if you do find these kids, you're gonna make them a target just as much as you are. So
It, it, it should
that
it should be noted, by the way, we are in spoiler territory at this point. Like it
yeah.
should be in case it wasn't clear. Like from this point forward, for anyone who's watching or listening to us, like all spoilers are on the table. So continue
Mm-hmm.
to listen at your own risk.
Yeah. So they kind of warn you through the force, through a force vision, that maybe this is not the right quest for Cal to be on. So it makes him have to make a difficult decision at the end of the game. But that I'm pretty sure that is the second trip back to Zepho.
Yeah, I believe so. That makes sense because of another event that we'll get to real shortly. The first
Yes.
trip. So what I remember is like they think Zepho isn't occupied by the Imperials. You learn shortly after that's not the case. Like they are very clearly doing something on this planet. They have a heavy duty mining operation set up, and you actually have to traverse through some of that equipment. There's this one sequence in particular which is so cool where these pistons smashing against this cliffside wall, and you can actually see this. This is what's so cool about the game is you can see so many of the locations you're going to travel to from a distance, and one of
Mm-hmm.
those locations is like these pistons smashing against the cliffside in real time. And eventually you get there, and you have to use your force freeze ability, which is kind of like the stasis ability in Dead Space. For those who've ever played that game, it's a very similar kind of ability, and you actually have to freeze the pistons so that you can actually move through them. And if you're not quick enough, you will be turned into a pancake, which I don't believe
Yes.
is something that Cal desires in this moment.
Right. And I just realized I was getting it confused. I was mixing Bogano and Zepho, but
Mhm,
Bogano is where all this stuff happened. What I was saying, but yeah, Zepho, you do come
mhm.
back to quite a couple. I mean, I came back. I think you're only supposed to come back twice, but I came back quite a few times because I wanted 100% the game,
Same.
and it's the biggest. It was the biggest place to explore. There were so many sections where come the last time I really didn't want to go back. I was kind of over it. And I was like, I wish I could have done this in the two times that I visited this place, you know? So I think they might have overgone over the line there for the exploration. But yeah, it's definitely the biggest area and probably where the most action takes place, I would say.
Yeah, one thing I will say about this game, kind of deviating from this and going back into kind of the Metroidvania portion of this. So this game has a lot of backtracking. You'll be
Hmm.
revisiting planets, you'll be revisiting previous areas. Paths will loop into areas that you've visited before, and that will open up a new path that you can explore from there. Um, I don't think this game does it quite as well as Metroid does. A lot of the pathing in Metroid, or at least Metroid at its absolute best, it feels very natural. The paths loop into each other. It feels convenient, but not something that's just open in front of you. It's something you have to explore and look for. Like a lot of people criticize Metroid Dread in this aspect, but I actually think it does a phenomenal job in terms of the backtracking and traversal, where it gives you the option of traveling a long way if you want to, but if you do a little bit of exploring, you can find a much quicker route almost every time that will generally lead you in the right area of what you're looking for. In this game, a lot of the pathways they don't really start to open up until that second trip when you land on
Hmm.
Zepho, and when you get to Kashyyyk and Dathomir, a lot of those paths are very point A to point B, and there isn't a lot of room to like shortcut your way from. In terms of Kashyyyk in general, it basically is like one long line from point A to
Yeah.
point B, and so there isn't really a way to like re-navigate yourself and make your way to another portion of the map, and there isn't a
Hmm.
fast travel option either, which I thought was a bit strange considering you're in a spaceship and you have landing pads. I thought it
Yeah.
would have been an easy way to implement some fast travel, kind of similar to Metroid Prime 3 if you ever eventually get to that game.
Got you. Yeah, I was a little turned off by the not being able to fast travel to places you've already like explored and visited because especially on Kashyyyk where you said it's like a straight line. I had to go back through that straight line like at least 3 times if I wanted 100% the game.
Mhm.
Because there's a couple very missable items there. So that was kind of frustrating. I would have appreciated it if like there's the save stations which are places where Cal can meditate and activate his skill tree and rest and regain his health and all that kind of stuff. I would have liked if you could, go fast travel that way. But I could see why they might have struggled with that because they were like, how do we explain this in a way that makes sense to Star Wars? Like, how can you travel between these points? So I can understand why that wasn't the case, but that would have been how I'd have done it. Um, so yeah, I can agree with how you go back and re-explore new places, and sometimes you do unlock shortcuts, but not all the time. And so hopefully that gets a little bit better with the second game.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree there. So you explore the first temple, and then I can't remember why, but that leads you. I think you find a clue that leads to the Zepho being on Kashyyyk as well, and I believe that's what leads you to go to Kashyyyk next. And you do that in the middle of the Imperial invasion on Kashyyyk, which is really cool being able to experience that. Really cool sequence of you land in you I think you dive off the ship and land in the water so that you're undetected. And then
Mhm.
as you're swimming to shore, you see these giant AT-ATs rise out of the water. You actually climb onto one of them because there's some like seaweed stuck to it or something, and you actually get to hijack it. And that's
Mhm.
I'm always a sucker for a good hijacking sequence, and the AT-AT is one of my favorite Star Wars vehicles. So being any opportunity I get to pilot one of those is just wonderful.
Yeah. I did like that part. The controlling of the AT-AT was very guided, and that's probably for the best because I was not great at it. But I it was cool because you get the attention of the the people that are helping with that invasion, the start of the rebellion, I should say. But when Saw Gerrera shows up, I was like, Saw Gerrera's here. Like, I don't really like him, but I'm like, oh, okay, he's here. So that was kind of cool to see him
and
around.
and once again reprised by Forrest Whitaker, which
Yeah,
really
he does a good
surprised
job.
I remember hearing that and I was like, wow, this guy's Saw impersonation is really good. And sure enough, in the credits, like, nope, that is indeed Forrest Whitaker.
I love that Star Wars projects will come back to these actors, like Forrest and Liam Neeson, and be like, "Hey, do you want to just come and do a few lines for your character?" And they're like, "Yeah, all right, cool." I just think that's so cool that they come back for it, and it's probably just a couple things that they say and do, and it's great.
Yeah, and what I like about this is that it doesn't feel like a forced cameo either. Like it makes sense for Saw to be here.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
Saw is a freedom fighter. He's like
Mhm.
very much into the rebellion. Like as soon as the rebellion isn't really formed yet, but he's fighting against the Empire. Like as
Mhm.
soon as Order 66
Yeah.
goes down, it makes sense that he would be here. With Resistance fighters doing all that, and so you kind of so he doesn't really know what to think of you yet, but he's like, "Well, you're shooting the guys that we're shooting at too, so why don't we team up?" And
Mhm.
then so you basically help him take over the facility. That's a really cool sequence as well. You also encounter some wildlife, which I imagine arachnophobic people are not going to be very fond of.
Eh, they were okay. I'm used to Zelda spiders, so I was like, this is not as bad.
Yeah, I like so the base spiders you fight are fine. It's the super one, the white spider you
It's
face.
like the albino spider,
Yeah,
yeah.
that thing it gave me so much trouble during my first play. It took me so much time
Yeah.
to adjust to that. I died countless times when I faced that for the
Yeah.
first time.
Yep. Yeah, that's a tricky one. There's some parts on Kashyyyk that I don't really care for the wildlife trying to eat you and attack you. I felt that way about Dathomir too, though. Dathomir is just a gross planet in general, but
So this is kind of where so I don't remember what happens next, but you help Saw take over the facility.
hmm
I believe you fight off some ATSTs, the chicken walker things on the base. They
yes, yep.
drop on the base, and then I believe something happens, and this is where you have to go back to Zepho. Is that correct?
Mm. I can't. Oh, it's because you were looking for the chief. He's not there, so they're like, "Hey, we'll find him for you, and we'll call you back." So you're just like, "Okay, I'll continue my adventure and go to these other places I need to explore to basically continue the story." Um, I'm pretty sure that's what happens because you're looking for him because that's who told you to look for on Kashyyyk.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, so I believe someone in the comments can correct me if I'm wrong, because again, it's been a couple years since I've played this now, at least this part of it. But I believe after this, you go back to Zepho, and this is where we really start getting some major story details, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So this time, with your new force powers, you start to explore more of the Imperial controlled sectors. You find a crashed star destroyer. You know what? We haven't talked about one of the most important parts of of the storytelling device, is the environmental storytelling, and that's the force psychometry ability. And basically, and this is like a huge story.
Oh
Yeah, this is a
yes.
huge storytelling and gameplay device in this game. and it's actually a canon ability in Star Wars. So it's really cool to see this actually implemented in as a game mechanic. It's a very effective one,
Mhm.
and basically it allows Cal to touch objects and like sense, what that object had in the past, like what who interacted with it, what its relationship was. And
Mhm.
sometimes Cal will like mutter his own dialogue, like, "Oh, it appears such and such was blah blah blah," and sometimes you'll
Mhm.
actually hear like the voices, like for instance,
Yes.
there's one I remember in particular that just sunk my heart when you find a crash set Jedi Star Destroyer and you find a clone trooper helmet.
Yes,
Yep,
I know, I felt the same.
yep.
I was like, "Oh, no."
And it's before Order 66, and you just hear this just
Yes.
regular clone dialogue, and then all of a sudden you hear the clone like, hold on, I'm getting a transmission from
Yeah.
for Chancellor Palpatine, and then that's when it cuts off.
Mhm.
You're like, oh,
Yeah, it's really sad, and they used the same clone voice actor from
D.
the
Bradley
Clone Wars,
Baker,
and
the goat.
it was like I was just like, "Oh my god," and I knew he was in the cast because I had looked up the cast before, and I'm like, "Am I gonna see some, like, clone crap? Because that's gonna break my heart," and of course it did. So yeah, I remember that when we reached those memories, and I'm just like, "Oh god, this is so rough," and also in Cal's memories too with the clones was
Hmm.
really rough as well.
Well, we'll
So
get there soon. We'll get there soon. But yeah, and then as you're exploring the ship, you actually learn that that's like a major part of why the ship crashed. So Order 66 happens, the clones turn, and as a result, uh the two Jedi's on board, they send the ship down. I can't remember if they
mhm.
both perish or not, or if just the Padawan survives.
The Padawan, the master died in the Padawan, like in the Padawan's arms, but the Padawan was injured, so he died from his injuries a short time after,
Gotcha.
if I'm
Okay.
remembering right.
Gotcha. But yeah, and so that and again, so that's like a part and the game does a lot of these short storytelling segments as well, where you'll learn about little,
Mhm.
like every little structure, every little device you encounter has like its own little story to tell. And that's another thing that
Yeah.
reminded me a lot of Metroid Prime in particular, because that whole trilogy does something very similar to where you have a very basic narrative on top of that, but you have all of these little narratives contained inside that have their own little stories that you can explore. And like
Mhm.
once you like have an understanding of all of them, they start to give more clarity to that bigger narrative at play. And
Yeah.
that definitely reminded me a lot of yeah, particularly that Prime trilogy in regards to that. And this ship I think is one of the best sequences where where it does that. So you're exploring this crashed Jedi starship. I think they're called Venators, Venator class starships.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So you go deep down into to this Imperial facility from there, and you encounter the numbered sister again. I can't remember what her name is, but it's round two. You lost to her the
Yeah.
first time. You're going at it again. You're still at a disadvantage, but you hold your own a little bit more. She's about to kill you before BD1 at the last second manages to hack a force field between the two of you, and you get a
Yeah.
classic,
Saved your
yeah,
butt.
literally saves your life. And like that, you get a classic Star Wars dialogue moment, and this is where our first major twist is revealed. So we learned before that Seer cut herself off from the Force because she lost her Padawan Trilla. We assume that Trilla was dead, but that is not the case. In Star Wars fashion, everyone is more related than it seems because the Ninth Sister removes her helmet, and it is none other than Trilla Sundari. Dun dun
Yes.
dun.
Yeah, cuz like I'm pretty sure you're kind of learning Seer's story, and it's kind of unfortunate how she told it and how it actually plays out and how it actually turned out to be. But I did look it up just so we have our facts straight. Trilla is the second sister.
Gotcha.
There's so many. You do fight the ninth sister, but there's so many of them, sisters, brothers. I can't keep track of them either. But yeah,
It's a
that
whole
when
math
you find
equation to figure
out,
them out.
yeah, when you find out that this is Trilla, her Seer's Padawan, you're just like, what? What is happening? And she tells you that Seer's a liar, and so you're just like, what is happening? You know, because you're starting to like look up to Seer as Cal's instructor and guiding him back into using the Force. After he lost his master so horribly. So yeah, that was definitely a good plot twist. That was a very good moment.
Yep, and then as you make your way into the temple, Seer is also like destroying the temple like as you progress. So the first temple you explore, it's pretty much just you exploring the temple on its own, maybe dealing with some
Right.
Zepho security forces, but there isn't really anything else you have to worry about. Not the case here. You very much have to deal with Imperials as well as Trilla, like, you know, destroying the environment and trying to halt your progress like as you go. And you make your way through the temple, but just as you're about to get back to your ship, you get in a fight with a random bounty hunter, and there's multiple pathways you can take,
Oh yeah.
but all three of the pathways that you take are always going to be guarded by a bounty hunter. So it's impossible.
Mhm.
It is impossible to escape the sequence, but you'll lose every time. You have to. It's part of the story. They will tranquilize you, and you wake up on an unknown spacecraft world. I can't quite remember.
I don't remember. It just looked like Sakar. There's a lot of Thor connections in
Right?
this.
Yeah. Now that you say, I do get some Sakar vibes from it.
Yes.
Even like the
Yes.
announcer guy definitely reminds me kind
Oh
of the
yeah.
Grandmaster.
100%. Mhm.
But yeah, so basically
Y-
you wake up on this unknown planet. You find out that that Grief is in debt to some very bad people, and as revenge, they've kidnapped you and they are forcing you to do a Roman Colosseum fight against a bunch of creatures that you've already fought before. With
mhm.
some Star Wars rock music playing and some Star Wars alien rock
Yeah.
music playing in the background. You do that. You take them all out. You get back with the crew, and you confront Seer about this, and she finally tells the truth about everything that's going on. And I believe after that, you do your second trip to Kashyyyk after this.
Yeah, I think so. And this is where you learn the double jump. Cuz they finally got a hold of the chief. I can't remember what information
Tarfall.
that he has. Yeah, that Enna wanted you to go find, but that's the point of that. You learn some double jumping. You find this giant bird. Don't remember what the bird's called.
Me
And you
neither.
climb their tree. You climb their big old tree, and it's cool.
Well, you don't just climb that tree; you also slide down that tree because
Oh yeah, that's right.
so you know we've had our confrontations with the second sister up to this point, but we haven't really confronted the ninth sister
Mhm.
past the opening. But she is pissed. She is not happy.
Yeah.
Um,
No bueno.
she wants that promotion. She wants our head on a stake. And so she starts by shooting the whole tree trunk, and we get some Super Mario 64 sliding down the tree as we
Oh
avoid.
yeah.
Really, I mean, really, like you got to have the slider theme playing during that. It's too
Mhm.
perfect. But yeah, so you're sliding down the tree, avoiding all that, and then finally you make your way to the top of the tree, and you get on a one-on-one counter with her. I don't know about you. I think this is the hardest boss fight in the game.
I only died once. I figured she had a lot easier pattern to figure out than Trilla did, in my
Really
opinion. I thought so.
interesting. I
Um,
had a lot easier time with Trill than I did with the ninth sister.
okay, I
Interesting.
definitely struggled more with Trilla, but maybe it's just our different gameplay
Yeah.
styles or whatever. But I yeah, she was kind of to me. She was like I understood why she was there. I kind of wish we had more Inquisitors that came after us because it was just Trilla and then this ninth sister. So it kind of felt like I kind of wish we had a couple more just so it really felt like the Inquisitors were after you this whole time. Because that's what's going on in the back of Cal's head is they're after him, but it kind of feels like they're not when you only fight two of them. Um, it was a good fight. I really liked it. There's a point where you cut off her hand, and I was like, oh, there goes Star Wars with the hands
Hmm.
again. And 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 then also she kind of talks about like making the dark decisions, kind of making turning to the dark side kind of stuff. And unfortunately, Cal is like he kind of has to make a choice with her, and he force pushes her off the tree. And I'm like, I was thinking he's killing people all up until this point, no problem. But for
Yeah.
some reason, he struggled with the ninth sister for a
I
second there,
feel like
probably
Star Wars. I
because,
feel like Star Wars does that a lot, where it's like
yeah,
these characters are just slaughtering so many people, but then all of a sudden there's this one particular character that's important, and suddenly it's like, oh man, if I kill this person, I'm bad. All of a sudden, it's
I think it's because the character points it out, maybe because that's what she did. She was just like, like you could be like this, and win, and Cal's kind of like, yeah, shoves her off the tree, you know?
It's giving me flashbacks. Star Wars, Clone Wars, and Rebels in particular is so guilty of this.
Yes. Yeah, cuz okay, first of all, I love Rebels. You
Same.
can't see him, but I have a chopper down there and he's a
Rubber?
homicidal maniac, but we all love him. So, it's fine.
Oh, dude, Chopper is a psychopath.
He's a straight up
I love
psychopath.
him though.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do that, and then I believe you do your first trip to Dathomir after this, and this is where we finally meet Marin, the the last major cast member we're going to meet on our adventure. So Marin is, for those who haven't watched the Clone Wars, the Night Sisters were a tribe of female Force users who practiced a specific type of the dark side of the Force that involved like potions and magic and whatnot. And they
Yeah.
were ultimately slaughtered by the Separatists, led by General Grievous,
Mhm.
on the orders of Palpatine, because he thought that they, in particular, Mother Talzin, who was kind of like the matriarch, was too
Mhm.
powerful, and he needed them off the chessboard. Marin is one of the few surviving Night Sisters in this massacre, and so immediately you land on the planet, and she's understandably incredibly hostile with you, particularly because of someone else that she met beforehand,
Mhm.
who she no longer trusts. But she's immediately hostile to you, and her, as well as the Dathomirian warriors, which are based off the Zabraks, which is Darth Maul's species.
Right. Yep.
They attack you, and these guys have a very interesting fighting style with like the laser bows and whatnot. I
Mhm.
can't remember if you can reflect the bows or not. Can you do that?
You can.
You can.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I couldn't remember if you could or not. But yeah, these guys, the pairing is a lot more difficult with these guys, and they will also swarm you a lot more easily.
They hit
They
hard.
are very aggressive. We're not talking like Assassin's Creed villains where they'll all surround you, but then they'll all go like one at a time, and then they'll wait for their partner. Like no, they will like gang up on you, and so
Yeah.
you have to like space them out and take them out one at a time. It takes a lot of patience to do so, but once you start to get a hang of it, you'll get used to it. Marin also uses her Dathomirian magic to reanimate the dead, which is something from the Clone Wars, that the Night Sisters did as well, and so those become
Yep.
a target as well. They look scary. They're really not that difficult. They look more scary than they actually are,
Right.
but
Yeah.
yeah, the first time you see them and they start hatching out of their little cocoons, like it's really creepy. And there's also some obvious foreshadow. Like I remember like that was one of the scannable objects in that game, and you can scan it. It's like, oh, it appears there's like a decomposed
It's like a
tissue.
grave.
Yeah, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh well, we're on Dathomir. I think I know where this is going.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember watching those episodes in the Clone Wars and I was like, I don't care for this group of people and that sounds
Really?
bad. But like I just thought that the Night Sisters were kind of like the way they practice and the magic they use is kind of like really grim and macabre and kind of just like I wasn't a fan. And the way they use the Night Brothers too is pretty sad. Like you
Oh
find
yeah.
out more about Maul that way is in him and Savage and it's like kind of sad on their part. But yeah, so I wasn't like a fan. So when I went to Dathomir, I was like, I don't like this place. But then you meet Marin, and you're kind of like, oh, that sucks. Like she's one of the last few that, and she was like a child when all this happened. When all her people, all her sisters, her mother were slaughtered. You know, so and it's like one of the things I love about her is you kind of get to know her in a similar trauma as Cal's that way.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, and so you come back to you do your second trip to Dathomir like very shortly after your first trip. It's a
Mm-hmm.
much closer condensed than the Zepho and Kashyyyk trips. But throughout the adventure, um, Marin, I don't want to say starts to warm up to you, but she starts slowly taking down more and more of her barriers. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, and so you learn that the reason that she doesn't trust you is because literally her entire life she's been betrayed by people with lightsabers, whether it be the
Yeah.
Empire led by General Grievous who slaughtered the Night Sisters, or whether it be a new character that you meet shortly after Marin sends her people after you,
Mm-hmm.
Malicos, who is someone who came to the planet, kind of falsely idling as an aide, but was actually very much deep into the dark side of the Force and wanted to control the resources for himself. And because of that, she just doesn't trust Force users in general. But it's through your actions and how you've dealt with your trauma that she's able to warm up to you. And in particular, the big moment where this comes to light is where we finally learn what really happened during Cal's journey. So you attempt to enter the Zepho temple for the first time, and you see Jaro Tapal. You know what? I'm remembering what the sequence is now, so we're getting to it now. So you enter the Zepho temple for the first time on Dathomir, and you encounter your old master there, or at least a projection of him, Jaro Tapal,
Yeah.
and you're in a
Yes.
1v1 against him. Again, you're not winning this fight. You're not supposed to.
No. Yeah.
And basically, in this force vision, he has Cal at a standstill, and it's because Cal cannot let go. Basically, he
Mhm.
keeps trying to win this fight against him, but you can't win a fight when you're supposed to let go. And
Mhm.
ultimately, this projection literally crushes Cal's lightsaber. And when we go back to reality,
Mhm.
we actually see Cal doing it himself. So I
Yep.
thought that was like a really cool cutscene transition there. And now Cal's like, well, this sucks. Now I can't enter the temple, and my lightsaber is destroyed. Well,
Mhm.
we're done. So
Yep.
so we go back to our ship, and Seared says, like, no, we can still construct you a new lightsaber. I know a place. And I can't remember the plan off the top of my head, but it's one that first appeared in Clone Wars. And
It's yeah, Ilum.
Ilum,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. And this is
Yes.
basically, we learned about this in Clone War. It's a planet that harvests kyber crystal, or not harvest, but
Mhm.
it naturally grows kyber crystals, and it's part of a Padawan's journey, like part of their test to go to the planet and find these kyber crystals on their own. And so Seer takes
Mhm.
you there to find a new kyber crystal and construct a new lightsaber. And we get some more really cool environmental storytelling where we can actually like scan parts of the environment. We can actually hear some of these Padawan journeys. I could be wrong. I think you even hear Yoda at one point.
I think so. I know there's another Jedi with them, I think, but usually Yoda is the one that takes the Padawan to Ilum, so
Yeah, he does so
I'm
in the
pretty
Clone Wars. I remember that.
yeah, but Cal also says from his memory that Yoda took him there. So maybe that's what we're remembering.
Hmm.
I can't be sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, so you go through this temple. You finally make it to the kyber crystal, but then I can't remember quite what happens, but ends up getting submerged in like freezing water, and I can't
Mhm.
remember how he gets in there, but he's doing that.
He just kind of has wrong footing at the wrong time and falls through and lands in water.
Gotcha.
Um yes, and I mean it's so cold and so debilitating, but the force is guiding him through his younger self to go,
That's
you know.
right. And then yeah, and you can
Yeah.
actually see his younger self actually pull him out of there, which I thought was a really
Yeah.
cool visualization there.
Mhm.
So Cal find
Pretty sure his younger self says trust me, which I thought was cool cuz it was like the force saying trust me. Let's go,
mhm.
you know? I like that.
So yeah, he makes his way out of there. He finally finds the kyber crystal, and then it breaks. after
Yeah, that was depressing.
and after the Cal's like at rock bottom. Like I just almost died for this thing, and it just breaks like that. And then BD1 comes up to him, and his final memory is unlocked. And this is where like talks about his entire plan about how he erased BD1's memory and how he sacrificed himself and whatnot, and I can't remember how this happens, but somehow this like wills Cal to like repair the kyber crystal. I can't remember the full sequence of events there, but
So, he gets a little bit, more motivation from realizing that BD1 chose him because BD1's task was to choose somebody to trust in order to unlock his memories. So he's like, "You trust me, Seer trusts me, Grease trusts me. These Force sensitive kids are gonna trust me. Like I have to do this." And he doesn't repair the Kyber crystal. It's how he makes the two lightsabers that connect together because he also has Seer's lightsaber now. Seer gives
yes,
it
that
to
that
him.
that is important.
So yeah, I don't think I think he uses them both the separate pieces for it. I don't remember if he repairs it or not.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Cal repairs that, and actually, we got about 10 minutes for my meeting, so I'm gonna start speeding things up as we make our way through. But boy, I think we can do that because we're on the last third of the game right now, anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cal repairs the lightsaber. We now have the detachable double-bladed lightsaber, and we find out that there's Imperial presence on the planet, and that
Mhm.
kind of leads not necessarily a classic Metroid escape sequence because we're not on a timer, but it has kind of those similar vibes where
Mhm.
we have to get out of this planet as fast as we can, and forces beyond us are converging on us, and it's a fight to the finish. So we make our way off the planet. We go back to Dathomir, and at this point, we make our way through the temple, and it's with this knowledge that Cal has learned that he's finally able to like take that last barrier down between him and Marin, and where now Marin is finally starting to gather his trust, and they both take on Malikos, who's been drawing power at the center of the temple, and this is where we learned about the Zepho getting kind of becoming too power hungry themselves and
Yes.
eating themselves alive, not literally, but in a metaphorical sense. And
Right.
we see Malikos kind of going down that same path, that it's we have to destroy him before he becomes too powerful. So, we do some WWE tag teaming him, we take him out of the picture, and then after that, it's back to Bogano. Back to Bogano. We have all the keys to unlock the secrets, and somehow Trilla is already waiting there for us. I can't remember how she knows we would be there, but nonetheless, she's waiting for us there, and she jacks our holocron, and she's taking it
Mhm.
back to the Imperial, or no, the Inquisitor Fortress, whatever it's called,
Mhm.
which also appears later in Kenobi, but nowhere near as cool
Yes.
as it is in this game.
Yes. But like I loved watching Kenobi having not played that game and people are like, "Oh my god, it's like from the game." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I can look forward to that in the game." And it was very similar, not as cool, very similar. But yeah, I really like that part cuz it's like this is it. This is the ultimate factor. You got to retrieve this holocron or it's lost to the dark side. I love the connection with Marin. Marin is my favorite character. I love the parallel story between her and Cal. I love that she, now that we know the name of the second game, I love that she calls her and Cal survivors of their
Mm.
traumas, of what happened, what the Empire did to both of them. That's what she calls them, and you could see her kind of opening her heart more to not only Cal but the rest of the universe because she leaves. She leaves that Dathomir, which she's been on her whole life. So that's cool. And then yeah, you get to this final face off moment with Trilla. You're trying so hard to kind of bring her back to your side, talk some sense into her, but she's so far gone. You could tell there's a part of her that wants to, but the dark side is so compelling that she's unable to until the very end for her anyways.
Yeah, and we really get the final pieces of everyone's story here. So
True.
as you enter the
Yes.
temple for the first time, you kind of get a more elaborated version of that initial Zepho vision you were talking about perhaps the danger of exposing the children in the holocron. And you actually get a vision of a potential future that might happen if that happens, and it's not pretty, and
It's not
it
good.
doesn't shy away. It's a bit graphic. I'll say that. And
Yep.
so we have another encounter with Trilla after. Is it so does this next part, does the next dream sequence, does that happen in the Zepho temple, or does that happen in the
It was
Imperial
it was
fortress?
it was in the Zepho temple and
Gotcha.
then that's what urges you to go fight Trilla for the final time.
Gotcha. So during this final fight with Trilla, this time both of you are in a standstill, and you end up grabbing her lightsaber, and unintentionally you accidentally do some forced psychometry in the process, and you learn Trilla's entire backstory. And what I love about this next sequence of cutscenes is everything in this game is all shot in third person, except for this one cutscene, and it's so effective that when you do the forced psychometry on Trilla, you experience literally everything from her point of view, and
Mhm.
it is brutal.
It's
It
really
is
sad like
heartbreaking.
yeah.
So
It's sad.
basically you see Seer and them like on the run after Order 66. You see the Imperials finding her. You find Trilla finding out that Seer basically betrayed them, not intentionally, but basically betrayed them and told them the location. You see her getting tortured like in the first person view. Like, it is, again, The game does not shy away at this point at all.
Mhm.
And then finally, in first person, they meet her up with Seer again, and you actually see her transforming into the Inquisitor. And at this
Mhm.
point, we see Seer almost turn to the dark side, just in agony, watching her apprentice literally be transformed in front of her. And
Mhm.
it's heartbreaking, but so effective at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it really tells you how how hard it is to let go. That's like the biggest, Jedi thing in order to follow the light side is letting go, because if you can't, you you fall to the dark side, and that is an issue that Trilla obviously had, and an issue that Seer is struggling with, and why she cut herself off from the Force.
All right, 3 minutes remaining before my meeting. Let's speed run through this last part. So
Go for it.
we're in the final area, the Fortress Inquisitorius. It's very clearly a final area. Trilla has the holocron. We need that so that the children of the Force are not exposed. So we 1v1 Trilla. We do win this fight this time because we've grown as a character. And
Mhm.
we think we've done it. Yay, we did it. And then all of a sudden,
Mhm.
and you hear a very familiar piece of music. I believe this is the only recurring piece of music from the Star Wars films, but you hear the theme of when Order 66 is first enacted. I believe it's called Anakin's Fall, and you see Darth Vader coming in from the background. He kills he kills Trilla for you because he's disappointed in how much she failed, and she's basically like avenge me. But
Yeah.
she's still on the dark side, but still like
There's
somewhat.
there was a pull. There was
Yeah.
a pull for her to come back, and I think Vader sensed that,
Uh
so
huh.
he killed her.
Yep.
Yep.
And so Vader's like, I'm Darth Vader. You're a nobody. Surrender or die. And Cal's like, uh,
Yeah, I
yeah.
should probably do that, but doesn't.
And so obviously like he's getting nowhere. Um,
Right.
there's this one sequence in particular. So Darth Vader is trying. I can't remember what he's doing, but he's like trying to force choke you, I think, and you're trying to like force pull an object to crush him, and without even
Right.
looking at it, he just like slowly pulls his hand up and just stops the object just like that. And just like, my god, they portray Vader as such a force of nature in this game. Again,
Yes. I
another.
was screaming.
And yeah,
He's terrifying.
yeah, I honestly I think this is even better than the Rogue One sequence. Like he is an
Mhm.
absolute monster in this finale. And this basically, we were talking about Metroid escape sequences. This is the escape sequence right
This,
here.
yeah,
You
I
can't
would
you
agree.
can't fight Vader. You just run, and the entire he's just using the Force to just tear apart the environment around you, and it's just like this tornado of chaos. So you make your way to the water tunnel. You just barely escape after Seer almost sacrifices herself, but you both
Mhm.
are able to be rescued. You get on the ship, and now Cal has to make an important decision. Do we do we follow the children of the holocron, or do we destroy it? And of course, Cal chooses to destroy the holocron. The correct decision.
Yes.
And now our new crew, along with Marin, are going to make their way in Jedi Survivor. Alasyn, I have a meeting in 1 minute. Quick summary of the game before we head off.
Okay. It's a fantastic game. Go play it, especially with Survivor coming out. It's got obviously a lot of connections to Metroid and other games. So, I mean, for all the Omega Metroid listeners, I think you would enjoy this game.
Yeah, as you all know, Mega Metroid, I've been wanting to talk about this game for a while, so I'm glad we finally did. And again, regardless if you're a Star Wars fan or not, I think you're going to enjoy this. But that is going to be all for us tonight, folks. Sorry for the quick mad dash exit. Life does take precedent at this moment, but we appreciate you all for listening. You can follow Omega Metroid at Twitter at Omega Metroid. You can follow me at Doominal Cross, Andy Spiteri at Spiteri316, Dakota Latsky at Dax City. Alasyn, I know you have a Twitter, but I don't know your Twitter
At
handle.
Yeah, I'm at Alasyn Eletha, and also Andy and I are at the Zelda
Yes,
Cast.
absolutely. Go check out the Zelda cast if you want to complement your Metroid knowledge with some Zelda drops as well. Check us out on YouTube and join the Discord as well. That'll be all, folks. Thank you so much for attending. Bye. Bye bye.
Bye.